Okay, I promised myself that we were not going to go here with this. I promised myself that this was all going to be, because here's the reality. The reality is that in today's sports landscape, in today's media landscape, in today's political landscape, in today's social landscape, I could be wrong in this, but I don't think people want constant strife. I don't think people want constant division. I don't think people want controversy, arguments, and flame throwing all the time. Because number one, as I've mentioned before, when you go out of your way to be unique, you are in fact ordinary. And I think that resonates for a lot of different things in terms of the approach of going about things. But overall, I just have the impression, and I could be wrong, but it's my belief or my philosophy or my approach that people want to be able to turn on the radio and just hear people talking sports. Maybe talk some stuff going on in our lives, have fun with it, not take things too seriously. And at times when we get fired up or you get polarizing or whatever it may be, you want it to be authentic and you want people to know that if you're on one that day, it's not an act. It's a legitimate, frustrated voice. And when it comes to the Colts quarterback situation, or when it comes to the Pacers and Miles Turner, or when it comes to Indiana making a coaching change, or it comes to Purdue making a football coaching change, whatever it might be, I don't want to be annoyed just to be annoyed. I don't want to play a part. I don't want to be an imposter of somebody who is acidic. I want people to know when they listen to this radio show that myself, Eddie Garrison, other members of the company, that what you're hearing is authentic and truly who we are. So that when something does bother me, you know I'm truly bothered. Excuse me for sneezing. I want you to know when you hear me being annoyed that I'm truly annoyed, that I'm not strategically annoyed.
That was a big one.
Thank you. And with that disclaimer, let me say this. I didn't think we were going to go here, but here we are. We have a lot to discuss. That's not my quote. That's the quote of Anthony Richardson's agent. Trust is a big factor, and that is at best questionable right now, said Richardson's agent in talking about the Colts. Anthony came back and made the improvements in the areas he needed to improve, and by all accounts, he had a great camp. Anthony Richardson yesterday found out that Daniel Jones will be the starting quarterback of the Colts. And Anthony Richardson was asked about that. And Eddie, I believe we have the audio of Anthony Richardson expressing whether or not he was surprised, shocked, what his reaction was. And it all comes together in a point where I'm not going to be annoyed strategically. I'm legitimately annoyed. And I'll explain after you listen to Anthony Richardson.
Somewhat surprised, but at the end of the day, we all knew somebody was going to have to be on this end of the stick, and it was me. I feel like I did improve. That's what I talked about earlier. My improvement was there, but, it's still ways I can improve. It's still ways I can become a better player, become a starter in this league. So I feel like I did a decent job of improving, but there's still a lot more I can do. It's only about to be year 3. Shane already talked about me being 23 years old, so I still got more time. I still got more time to grow and be a great guy in this league. So I'm looking forward, and I'm thankful for every opportunity.
Okay. Anthony Richardson, by all account, is a nice guy. And I have mentioned before, I'm the kind of guy, I like to root for the underdog. And I don't mean the underdog like, hey, this team's favored by 3 over this team. I mean, I like to root for and I believe in people who come from a different background than I. I admit it. I didn't grow up like uber wealthy, but I grew up in a middle class, maybe upper middle class family. My dad was a steel salesman that did not go to college. My mom did not graduate from college. My dad got a job as a steel salesman, worked for a company in Shelbyville, Indiana. My parents had grown up on the north side of Indianapolis. And when my sisters and I were the age of going to school, my parents bought their dream home that they saved for in the northeast side of Indianapolis so that we could go to Washington Township schools. And I was afforded an unbelievable opportunity of upbringing, of a support system from teachers to parents to friends, all of it. Couldn't ask for anything better. And I'm aware of the fact that not everyone was that fortunate. And I don't know Anthony Richardson's family, but I've seen documentaries from when he was in high school, and I am aware of the fact that Anthony Richardson grew up in a situation that was not necessarily the same as mine. Now, that's not to say that it was awful. I had a loving, supporting mom. He had a little brother he was close to. I mean, I think he had a good family nucleus, don't get me wrong, but they didn't grow up in a school with a ton of means like that of which I went to school. But he did get the opportunity to play collegiately at Florida, which is a big-time program, and he did get drafted into the NFL, and we're in year 3, not month 3, year 3. And Anthony Richardson has struggled both in terms of health durability of being on the field, not necessarily his fault entirely. But what do I say? You need repetition. And he was denied in this preseason some repetition because of lack of recognition. Because he did not check out of or recognize a blindside blitz coming by seeing a formation that not me, not Eddie, not Kevin, not James, not John, not Jeff, not Stephen Holder, but rather people who played the position at the highest level possible say should have been the very first thing you recognize on day one of camp in college as a quarterback, let alone the NFL. But with that, Anthony Richardson didn't get the reps in preseason because he didn't recognize, and then he was knocked out of that game, and then he goes into preseason game number 2, and he was okay, but he wasn't great, and he missed a few reads. But let me again read to you the quote and tell you why now I'm annoyed. We have a lot to discuss, said, I believe it's Derek, D-E-I-R-I-C, Derek Jackson, who is his agent. Trust is a big factor, and that is at best questionable right now. Anthony came back and made the improvements in the areas he needed to improve, and by all accounts, he had a great camp. And Richardson said, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit surprised. That right there shows me two things. Anthony Richardson, by saying that he was surprised that Daniel Jones was named the starter, shows a complete lack of recognition. And the biggest thing that he was asked to improve upon was ability to foresee things. No one disputes Anthony Richardson's arm. No one disputes Anthony Richardson's legs. No one disputes Anthony Richardson's body. No one disputes his overall athleticism. And I don't know that anybody disputes that he's a bad person or that he's a good person. I mean, by all accounts, he's a nice guy. But what has been begged for is to show progress in the area of maturity and recognition. Recognizing what it takes to be a quarterback in the NFL. Recognizing the commitment of what it takes beyond just making sure you're in the parking lot by 9. Recognizing different looks from a defense and what that means in being able to immediately compute in your head what play would work against that formation and what play would not. And yes, that actually, the thing that I just pointed out, he is not at fault, nor would he be alone if that is something that does not compute with him. Some of the best quarterbacks of all time from a talent standpoint and a pedigree standpoint have struggled with that. The thing that separates good quarterbacks from great quarterbacks is their inability to see what great quarterbacks do. Not everybody sees that stuff. But it was the biggest area where Anthony Richardson was asked to improve was in recognition and awareness and understanding. So for his agent to come out and say he improved in the areas that you asked him to improve, and then to have Anthony Richardson say, I was a little bit surprised when everybody else saw the tea leaves that, in fact, Daniel Jones might be in strong play here, shows that Anthony Richardson actually is admitting to and confessing to the one area that he was asked to not fail in, and that is recognition, anticipation, and understanding. And I feel bad for Anthony Richardson because you know who I don't trust? I don't trust the judgment of his agent. For his agent to come out and say, trust is a big factor, and at best that's questionable right now. And for his agent to insinuate that there could be like long-term fracture of relationship between Anthony Richardson and the Colts. When they needed a big play last year, whose hands did they put the ball in? Anthony's. Listen, I looked at his agent, and I don't know his agent. I don't know him, but let me give you a list of his clients. Jordan Travis, Anthony Richardson, Saron Neal, Khalil Davis, Jaheim Bell. Then he has college clients. DJ Lagway at Florida, Justin Rhett from Georgia, Levante Bentley at Colorado, Kenyatta Watson at Georgia State, Fred Davis of Jacksonville State. And he has a high school client, L.J. McCray, who's at Florida, by the way, and then he has Cimarron Wingo Jr., who is at St. Augustine High School. I mean no disrespect to his agent, but this does not appear to be somebody, maybe I'm wrong, and Amp Harris can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that this is somebody, this is not Drew Rosenhaus. This is not Worldwide West. This is not somebody who has an overall extended reputation of, and he might be the nicest guy in the world. I mean, he's a former player. I get it. He was a team captain, Legacy Sports Advisors. And I get that an agent's job is to speak up their client. I totally understand it. But in this case, this looks like a guy that is a little bit in over his skis. And therefore, when I look at Anthony Richardson, I say, what is Anthony Richardson's one knock as a quarterback? It is not his personality. It is not his demeanor. It is not his ability to play well with others. It's none of those things. It's simply the fact that he looks like a young player that is in over his skis. And then I look at it, and I look at how his agent is reacting to this, and I looked at how his agent is immediately on the defensive of this, and I think, no wonder. Anthony Richardson might have failed the biggest test in terms of his judgment by selecting the wrong representation, who is immediately picking a battle of trust. What did Anthony Richardson do to earn the trust of this franchise or its fan base? Do you trust that Anthony Richardson's going to be able to play 4 consecutive games? Do you trust that Anthony Richardson, more often than not, is going to make the right read or make the correct audible? Do you trust that Anthony Richardson is going to be able to go an entire drive down the field more often than not without fear of turning the ball over? Do you trust that Anthony Richardson is going to read something correctly so that he doesn't get hurt? Or do you trust that Anthony Richardson is going to, when you hand him the keys at a young age, do the right things? You know where the problem lies? The problem lies in the fact that the Colts in the beginning trusted him too much. We're at this situation because the Colts, at no fault of Anthony Richardson's and at no fault of his agent, when Anthony Richardson arrived on campus, they immediately gave him the keys and said, here you go, kid. Try not to hit anything when you pull out of the parking lot. And they trusted him too much. And they denied him the challenges that create organic growth for a young quarterback. So then they realized they erred. They went to him and they said, hang on, we need you to learn some things. And he taps his helmet and takes himself out of a game and tells his competitors that he was too tired to be out there. And you're supposed to trust him more than that? Do you trust Anthony Richardson to finish a hard drive? Do you trust Anthony Richardson to understand and grasp everything taking place around him? And that is in no way, shape, or form said based on anything other than the precedent of what we have to work with in our observation. So for his agent to come out and say in any way, shape, or form that this creates some sort of a division or a lack of trust between he and Anthony Richardson and the Colts brain trust, okay. Memo to both of them. The Colts just sent you the message that they don't trust you at all. At all. And the fans want to see Anthony Richardson play because they're intrigued and they're salivated by what might be, but there ain't anybody that wants to see him play based on a precedent of any sort of stability of what has been. I think most people in this town are rooting for the guy. I think most people in this town want to see him do well, not just for the Colts, but for Anthony Richardson. Because as a person, in terms of his character, he doesn't give you any reason to root against him. But now all of a sudden, his agent's going to give you that reason. Because I don't trust the judgment of his agent to know when and when not to say things. And I don't trust the judgment of his agent on whether or not what he is saying is the right place and the right time, and for that matter, even the right line. And if that's who Anthony Richardson selected to guide him through this process, then no wonder why we're here. Daniel Jones is the starter of the Indianapolis Colts, not because Daniel Jones blew away the Colts, because Anthony Richardson didn't, even when they begged him to do so. And that's why we are where we are. Yesterday, we had a huge show in terms of audience participation, in terms of the guests that we had on, in terms of Eddie playing perfect songs, coming in and out of breaks, our engagement, that's a word the kids use. We had a really big show yesterday, and I want to thank everybody and let them know that I appreciate it. I appreciate the fact it is totally the case when you do what we do for a living, like any other job, where you have some days that you feel on it and some days that you feel off it. And some days you feel like there are people listening and some days you feel like no one's listening. And when we have a day, it doesn't happen often, where a breaking news story happens just before we go on the air, then in those moments we can look at the metrics and realize that this is a place where people do turn to listen to and engage and react to what's going on within the sports in this town and the pulse of this town. And to be entrusted with that, trust, big word, to be entrusted with that, I appreciate that from everybody yesterday who tuned in, participated, downloaded it, whatever it may be. The fact that you trust us is greatly appreciated. And we take phone calls and we do the text line and all that because I trust all of you. Because trust is about reciprocity. Trust is about both people, maybe not even at the same time concurrently, but both people, both parties, both sides of things are working hand in hand together, knowing that there's something to lean on the other for, and at the same time let them lean on you. And that's what we did yesterday on this radio show, because there's trust there. I trust that listeners could call in and have great thoughts and opinions, which they did. Everybody did. And hopefully they trust that we can facilitate that. That's how trust works. Trust does not work of, I'm going to come in, you're going to ask me to do things, and I'm then going to tell you that I did them, even though there's no tangible proof that that's the case. Did Anthony Richardson improve from a year ago? I guess. How would I know? He threw 14 passes in the preseason. He was scheduled to and expected to and asked to pass more in the first game, and he couldn't do it because the exact same thing that happened to him so far in the course of his time here happened there as well, in the fact that he was knocked out of the game. And he was knocked out of the game because of the pinky, and then he couldn't show what it was that he was improving upon because he didn't recognize something, and that knocked him out of the game. So that's the issue there. And for his agent to come out and say that, quite frankly, rubbed me the wrong way. Rubbed me the wrong way. Good afternoon to you. It is a Wednesday, Hump Day Wednesday. My name is Jake Query, Eddie Garrison, the other voice you hear on this program. It is Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fam. Plenty to talk about today. This will be a topic of conversation, no question about it, because we've now heard from Daniel Jones on his reaction. We've got more from Anthony Richardson on his reaction. We also need to get into, at further detail, the situation with the Fever because we now know Sophie Cunningham is out for the year. We are awaiting more clarity on the situation involving Caitlin Clark. And so Stephanie White will join us on the show today at, you said about 2:30, right, Eddie?
Yep, 2:30.
Head coach of the Fever joining us 2:30 today. Did we decide Stephanie's walk-up music?
I need to go back and listen to our conversation last week. Did we decide last week during the segment?
I think it was Hootie, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Hootie. It was Hootie and the Blowfish. Yes, you're right.
I believe it was Hootie and the Blowfish, and
You
that
are
will
correct.
be the walk-up music.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, an hour before that at 1:30, Charlotte Carroll of The Athletic. She covers the New York Giants will join us. We'll dive a little bit more into like Daniel Jones and his time with New York. And plus, Jake, if you don't mind, we got to fit in a question about my boy, Tyrone.
Oh, yeah.
We got to see how he's doing out there in the Big Apple.
That, of course, Tyrone Tracy from Purdue. And speaking of Purdue, as we anticipate here just about 10 minutes from now, we'll get into that, right? Because they've got a new head coach.
New head coach Barry Odom, and one of the seasoned veterans on the team that's coming from UNLV to West Lafayette. And Tony Grimes is a cornerback. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of college or coming out of high school. He was the top recruit, I think the top defensive back in his class out of Virginia. So he'll join us in 10 minutes.
So we will get into that as well. Eddie, do you have anything fun and exciting happen to you last night?
I can't think of anything.
That sounds both fun and exciting.
Oh, I got my hair cut. That was about it.
You got your hair cut?
I did.
I'm sorry to tell you this. It looks great,
Thank you.
but it doesn't look any shorter north. Let me tell you what happens to you when you get older. When you get older, if you keep the sides and the temples of your hair short, you can't tell how silver it is.
Yeah, I know. You've told me this. Yeah. That's why you keep it short on the sides and somewhat
Man,
longer
it's-
on the top.
The problem is, at this point, I've got like the silver streak and then the kind of darker on top. Let's just go all of it. Like, I want all or nothing here, right?
What'd you do last night?
That's an excellent question.
Anything fun?
No.
Okay.
I realize you, and I realize that I'm hitting you off guard here, so I don't mean to put you in a bad spot. Between the situation with my car,
Oh, yeah.
and again, I paid for a brand new head gasket repair 4 months ago, and now it appears as though the head gasket's gone out. That seems problematic. So I'm dealing with like the situation of getting that, towed and et cetera. And then, my dad's still recovering, even though he's good, but there's a lot that goes into that. So that I was dealing with both of those things yesterday. Here's the one thing. Let me tell you one thing, Eddie, that is a predicament of mine. Okay? My dad trusts me, right? Trust is the theme of the show today.
Yeah.
My dad trusts me, and since my dad is in the hospital and is not able to drive his car, he has a brand new car. It's my dad's pride and joy is his car. And so since my car is on the IR, my dad said, Jake, no one is driving my car. It's just sitting in the garage. Drive my car while yours. So it worked out, right? The only problem is I'm driving around in my dad's car, which is fine, but he's got a vanity plate that is his grandpa nickname.
Mm.
So I'm driving around
To make you feel cool.
I'm driving around in a Cadillac with a license plate that says Sir Yo-Yo. I mean, come on. If you get out of that car, you should either be an 84-year-old grandfather or somebody from the And One mixtape.
So,
right?
yo, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, and then I get out of the car, right? People trust somebody cool that's going to get out of that car, and then you get out and there's no trust there whatsoever. Tony Grimes is a Purdue Boilermaker. Circuitous route to land him in West Lafayette, but the head coach at Purdue has something to do with it, and we're going to find out exactly what's in store when we boiler up on the other side on this trust-filled Wednesday. Query and Company on the Fan. Harrison with a little bit of knowledge here. I thought you were playing this just because we're going to be happy today because we trust each other.
Jake, we trust each other every day, and we should always be happy to work with one another. Am I right?
Of course. Now, you're playing this in honor of Tony Grimes, correct?
That is correct.
Do you think he knows why you're playing it?
I don't know.
Shall we ask him?
We shall.
Tony Grimes is a new Purdue Boilermaker, part of the defensive backfield that Barry Odom brought with him from UNLV. And Tony, a cornerback who has played at Texas A&M, North Carolina, and the Runnin' Rebs before, which, by the way, Tony Grimes, is UNLV football known as the Runnin' Rebels or just the Rebels?
The Running Rebels, but you can call us the Rebels as well. Call them the Rebels.
Because I always wondered if the Runnin' Rebels were called that just because of like the high-flying Jerry Tarkanian basketball team and if the other sports were just Rebels. But nonetheless, do you know why we led and introed you with that song?
It was a great day. I mean, it's a great day to be a Boilermaker, that's for sure.
Okay, see, he's
Great
happy
day to be
about
a
that.
Boiler fan. Yes.
Eddie, go ahead. Would you like to divulge?
You can, Jake. It's up to you.
It is my understanding, Tony, and you tell me if I'm wrong in this because it wouldn't be the first time. I was wrong once in 1978 about something. Did you attend Princess Anne High School?
Yes, sir, I did. I did.
When you look at the list of notable alumni from your high school, you are listed on the Wikipedia page, and as we know, Wikipedia is, in fact, all-knowing. So, too, Juice Newton. She used to sing the song Playing with the Queen of Hearts, I think, right? Curtis Strange, pretty good golfer.
Okay.
And then the guy that did that song, Pharrell Williams. You knew this, correct?
Yes, I did. Pharrell Williams actually did his a little show at Princess Anne the year I was there. So
Really?
Yes, I did. Yes.
That's very
it was
cool.
that year when Something in the Water happened in Virginia Beach when everyone came down.
Very cool. Virginia Beach, by the way, is a beautiful area. It's a very cool area, and a lot of great players come out of there. You are one of them. Let's talk about this. You have landed now in Purdue. You said it's a great day to be a Purdue Boilermaker. But you come here along with your head coach from UNLV, and the reality is that seemingly you guys in camp and getting ready for the year all have to be wearing name tags because this is a conglomeration of a lot of faces that have been brought together. How have things gone, and how unusual is it now to have so many transfer players all trying to mesh into one team?
So far, things have been going amazing, and I love how our team came together from the spring, how we had a lot of new players come in the spring. It was tough, but I think in the locker room, we had a great player-led team, especially in the locker room. So everyone was cool, friends, and everyone just liked to compete. Then the summer came around, we got more new transfers, people left, people came, and, team chemistry wasn't there at first, but the more you work out with each other, the more you be around each other every day, especially in this camp, we've grown a lot. And I'm definitely proud of the team we got right now.
A week from Saturday, you open up against Ball State, and I'm curious, have you guys even started to get into – say Ball State and scouting plans and that kind of thing, or is it still at this point simply learning what Purdue is going to be?
I think we have a great idea of what Purdue is going to be, and I can't wait till we put it on display. But we're nibbling and dabbling in here and there in Ball State, but we're also just keep grinding and keep focusing on what we need to focus on to get better at what we need to get better at. But I can't wait to put it on the show next week.
Tony Grimes, by the way, is our guest of the Purdue Boilermakers. What is Purdue football? What is the brand and the style going to be for Purdue?
Hard, smart, and tough. And we're going to put our caps on that because that's what Coach Odom wanted us to do. Coach Odom drilled that into our mindset every day. We come to work hard, smart, and tough. And we do those three things, we're gonna be a good team.
How does a coach, you played for Coach Odom at UNLV. That's probably, presumably, why you ended up in West Lafayette when he left UNLV to come take the Purdue head coaching job. When you think about a practice and the way that he coaches, there's two kinds of coaches, Tony. There's the guys that instill the fear in you and are, screaming and yelling, and they're disciplinarians. And then there are guys that take the more soft approach, a Tony Dungy approach, where they let you know what they want and you trust them, big word today, and so therefore you don't want to disappoint them. Where does Coach Odom lie?
Coach Odom, Coach Odom has a great personality. He got a different traits with him, and he's actually, to me, and I've seen him because I was with him last year. He's both. Like he takes the till, the laid back, says what he needs to say, but he also has that switch where he can turn it on. And when he turns it on, and you can ask anyone, and when he turns it on, it's nothing to play with. But that's why we always respect Coach Odom, because he's going to give it to you real. He shows tough love. So, yeah, he's both. To me, he's both. I've seen both sides.
Are you guys a defense that, it's interesting. Tony Grimes, our guest from Purdue, he's a cornerback for the Boilermakers. There are, and we're seeing this now, I think, even in the NFL. Some defenses, Lou Anarumo, the new defensive coordinator for the Colts, I think he uses a defense that really relies a lot on the back of the defense, allowing for the front to give different looks and stunts and to really have kind of a reliability in the back end of your defense type system. And then you get defenses that are really reliant on the linebackers being kind of the anchor of things. Where does Barry Odom's defense lie in terms of linebacker use and overall scheme?
I think Coach Odom and our defensive coordinator, Coach Shear, they have great mindset, great defensive game plan, and we can do it all. We can rely on our linebackers more. We can rely on our defensive line more, or we can rely on our DBs more. So it's just a mixed variations of what he got in style.
Now I'm looking right here, by the way, at your high school. Your colors were red, white, and blue. You were the Cavaliers, is that right?
Cavaliers, yep.
Okay. So you've been a Cavalier, you've been a Tar Heel, you've been an Aggie, you've been a Running Rebel, and now you're a Boilermaker. Tell me why the black and gold is the most comfortable on you.
Black and gold is more comfortable on me because when I'm just older and I just got more confidence in myself, more swagger with myself, more I'm just older, so the black and gold is just going to fit more. I'm more comfortable, so that's the move.
What about Purdue itself has been an adjustment for you, let's say? And I don't even necessarily mean from a football standpoint, just maybe overall, but what has been the thing that has had or led to the most acclamation for you?
Honestly, I think the difference was definitely coming from Chapel Hill, coming from College Station, and coming from Las Vegas. West Lafayette, it's nothing in West Lafayette. West Lafayette is amazing. Don't get me wrong. I love West Lafayette. Great people here, but it's just everyone knows there's nothing in West Lafayette but West Lafayette. But that's what I love. I love a college town. I love a college town because when football season, everyone loves football. So when football season, the town is going crazy, and that's what we love. So I love a college town football school. So
hey, listen, Ross 8 at night in particular is pretty awesome. I love it. I went last year, went to a game up there, saw them play Oregon. I got my picture taken with the duck. Tony, don't get mad, but it was great, right? So I get it. I'm curious of this, and you would know better than anybody. Tony Grimes is a cornerback for Purdue. You have gotten a chance through practice to watch what Purdue is going to be offensively. What stands out at you? And for those that are unfamiliar or are curious, what is the style that we will see from the Purdue offense?
What stands out to me from our offense to this point, we just have a great offensive line, great team chemistry, other offensive line. Then we got a great receiving core. I think this receiving core might be one of the tops on the scene by the time for some time that I've been playing ball. Our scheme. Offensive scheme, to take the top off, we got receivers that got speed that can go down the field. So, yeah.
Last year, you obviously faced Boise State twice at UNLV. What was it like going up against Ashton Genty twice last year?
It was fun. Our DC knew what we had to do. Got to stop the run. Got to stop Ashton Genty. And there was times he had sorts of plays, but it was times, where we held him under a half and all that kind of stuff. So, but he's a great player, and he got the job done. I wish we could have, got the W against him, but not everything plays out the way it plays out.
Did he, it's interesting. He got off to kind of a slow start with the Raiders, so far in his time. But then all of the last game, he had a couple of runs where you're like, man, that dude runs hard. I don't know, I don't know if you'd list him as a breakaway speed guy. What's your overall assessment of having a lineup against him?
Oh no, he's tough to tackle. I think most people that have seen it through his tape and now I've seen it in the NFL. He's tough to tackle. Like he's not no easy one tackle guy. You gotta bring your you gotta wrap your arms, run your feet, and you gotta have multiple people tackle him. That's for sure. He's a great runner for sure. Breakaway speed, I'm not gonna list him as that because I really list him as he's just tough. He's gonna break tackles for sure.
Now, have you been on campus long enough? Tony Grimes is our guest. Have they let you know about the rivalry with Indiana and the bucket game, or does that happen later in the year?
Nah, they let me know that the first
game, or does that happen later?
At first, as soon as I got here, the fans let me know. People, when I went out to eat, they was letting me know. So yeah, it's a big thing here for sure, and then that's what I can't wait to play that game. Like I can't wait to play. Like if it's one game that I can't wait to play, it's that game. And I'm already picturing in my head it's gonna be a night game, snowy. I hope they come here. Yeah, I can't wait.
Already excited for the bucket game. I like it, but a lot of football between now and then. Lastly, let me ask you, what jumps out at you about the Big Ten in general? I mean, you have obviously now played in the ACC. You've played in the SEC. Is it Mountain West for UNLV? So you've played in a couple of different leagues. But what about the Big Ten jumps out at you, and maybe for that matter, even the different styles of play that you will see?
I feel what jumps out me into the Big Ten is they got all around, like, everything is good to me. Like, they got a Big Ten carry great DBs. Great DBs get drafted at the Big Ten. You also got great linebackers that get drafted at the Big Ten. You also got great defense ends, details that get drafted at the Big Ten. So it's like the defense for the Big Ten is, to me, that's where I see they fit more. Amazing.
Hey, did you play with Josh Downs at North Carolina, the now current Colt?
Yeah, that's my best friend. Yeah.
That's your best friend?
Yes, sir.
How often do you talk to him? Probably a lot, right?
Here and there, I check up on him. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
especially we're so close now.
So you'll be down for Colts game. Well, it's probably tough, right? Because you're going to be playing. But I guess at the very least, I'm going to guess that your favorite team growing up. I'm totally going on a guess here. Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to say that your favorite, and gosh, the years might be off here, so my apologies for being an old guy. I'm going to guess that your favorite player, based on the area where you grew up, was Michael Vick. And so I'm thinking that you might have been a Falcons fan, but at the same time, I'll bet a lot of your buddies were either Ravens or Redskins, now Commanders fans. Am I anywhere close?
Yeah. Yes, you're close. I definitely big Michael Vick fan. I wasn't a crazy Atlanta fan, but I was a big Michael Vick fan. But Washington Redskins, what it was before, but Commanders, I was a big a Washington fan. Come on. She's a big Washington fan. So
lastly, you're now a big Colts fan because of Josh Downs, right?
Yes. I watch the Colts for sure.
Tell us one thing about Josh Downs that nobody here knows.
He got a great sense of humor. And I don't know if he displays that a lot. I don't know if y'all see that a lot, but he got a great sense of humor.
He's a great player. He's been a nice player for them, and I would imagine that probably it made you a better player as well, both you guys going up against each other in practices on the regular basis. Purdue taking on Ball State to open things up. That will be a week from this Saturday. And then mark your calendars for the bucket game. He is predicting it right now. Cold in the snow and under the lights. So should be a lot of fun to watch. Mr. Grimes, we wish you the best of luck in West Lafayette. We certainly would love to have you back on the program, but we'll let you get back to work, all right?
Thank you. I appreciate you all. Y'all have a great day.
We should have gotten him to give a boiler up. I should have done that. Eddie, boiler up, right? That's fun.
He's a good guy.
Good interview, for sure. That was a strong call by you on looking up his high school and finding out prominent names from his high school and the Josh Downs connection.
You know, Jake, can you tell you're wearing off on me a little bit in that regard where you do the whole high school thing with some people at random?
Oh, yeah. It's always fun, right?
Is that like a proud dad moment for you?
You know where I'll tell you where that began. When Byron and I do our road trip every year, whenever we pass a high school, it's like a rule that we do We have to look up the high school and try to figure out like who the most famous person is, and we guess the mascot. When you pass by the high school, like, okay, what do you think it is? Oh, this school looks like it'd be the Eagles. Sometimes you can tell by the front, but
Right.
and it just started from there. And literally, we'll be out in the middle of rural nowhere America, middle of northern Louisiana, and you pass by some high school, and it's amazing. Every high school has at least one person that you're like, oh my gosh, okay, wow, that's weird. They went there. That's where that all began. Weird stuff, I realize. All right, back into the story of the day, which is trust. I trust that Daniel Jones might have also been not surprised, but relieved by the news yesterday. And I trust that he probably spoke. He did. And we'll let you hear what he had to say next. It's a Trust Wednesday. I'll probably get back on my high horse here in just a little bit and going over some of the things that were said and why it chapped me.
Why is it called the high horse?
I think it's because when you're up on it, you're overlooking things like ironically enough, Eddie, thank you for asking, it gives you better field of vision. Again, an area why there's lack of trust. But I think a high horse, it's because in the old days, he who was on the bigger horse was he of the authority, or she, correct? I'm assuming that's it. I don't know that. But even if that's not the case, that's what I'm going with, right? Daniel Jones yesterday named the starter for the Indianapolis Colts. He has spoken. And here is what Daniel Jones had to say on the news now as your 2025 season opening starting quarterback.
I understand this league and how it works, and you've got to perform at a high level week in and week out. And that's certainly what I expect of myself, and I'll be expecting of all of us in this offense. I think we all have high expectations of what we can be.
Now, let's go back to Anthony Richardson. We heard him say earlier that, he was a little bit surprised by it. Richardson was asked, by the way, or did speak about his respect for the decision itself. This was yesterday, though, I believe, correct?
You got to respect the decision. I feel like he's a better fit for the team, better fit for the outcome of us winning. So you just got to respect it and just keep working. That doesn't undermine any other work I've been putting in. Doesn't say that I haven't improved. I'm proud of the improvement I've made. Shane is also proud of that. So you just got to keep stacking on that. Just keep getting better.
Okay, I want to play for you two other people here. One of them is A.D. Mitchell. A.D. Mitchell is a guy that himself is trying to find some consistency. He's in year number 2. There was a lot of praise and expectation coming out of college. He struggled to find that in year number 1, but the coach that he plays for at the wide receiver position in Reggie Wayne had a similar route when he was a player. So you are a little more patient with the receiver than most positions, perhaps. But A.D. Mitchell this year started out with a pretty good camp and looked like a guy that might be able to get behind the defense a little bit. But one would think that Richardson's the guy that delivers that long ball more frequently than does Daniel Jones. A.D. Mitchell's thoughts on Daniel Jones as a starter.
Smart football player, very demanding at quarterback. He'll kind of, tell you what, he wants you to do, and it's an open dialogue there. So his work ethic is phenomenal. So I'm just looking forward to carrying that through the season.
Okay, now another guy that sees things. Somebody made a fascinating point to me. A friend of mine that was a general manager of a prominent restaurant here in Indianapolis said, you know what? We had a guy that was a server that was spectacular. He was great with the customers. He had a wonderful personality. And he knew the menu and the wine list like the back of his hand. But Jake, in the kitchen, he didn't want to do the things that we had to do. Polishing the silverware, helping out, making sure the dishes were clean, giving a hand where need be. And so ultimately, that conflict led to his dismissal from the restaurant. And the folks at the table that were the customers were outraged. But they didn't see everything that goes into the behind the scenes in the kitchen. Quentin Nelson is the kind of guy that would see everything that goes on in the huddle, in the locker room, in the building. His thoughts on the consistency or lack thereof at the quarterback position for the Colts.
I think I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. You look around the league and see just the consistency of having Patrick Mahomes or a quarterback behind you that's been the franchise player for years and years and years, and getting to build that chemistry with that quarterback year after year is something that there is an advantage to when it comes to O-line play. So to answer your question, yeah.
Obviously, the question is the lack of consistency something that impacts the offensive line? Also, very clear that somebody within the locker room is a good whistler. Are you a good whistler, Eddie?
Not really. I think that question, Jake, was actually him if he was frustrated. He's frustrated with the fact that he hasn't had a consistent quarterback operating the offense more
Right.
so than it was the impact of the quarterback in the offense or whatever, in the offensive line.
Well, but kind of the same answer. I mean, yes, it's easier to play as an offensive line when you have consistency at quarterback. Give me a song off the top of your head. I have to make sure that my mouth is it's the word nobody ever wants to hear. Starts with an M. Sounds
Moist.
like hoist. Yeah, thanks. Give me a. I'll work on my whistling skill here. I used to be a very good whistler. I had a very big reputation as a whistler.
Okay, in honor of our 2:30 guest, let's do a song by Hootie and the Blowfish.
See, my. You know that's the opening. Now I'll get to the chorus. You ready? Not bad, right? Dogs are going crazy all over the city.
No idea what song that was.
Hold my hand.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hold my hand.
Kind of.
I started out with a little love. Okay. I can see Todd Meyer sprinting in here right now saying, go to break. Come back and talk about what it was that was said that I thought to myself, you've got to be kidding me. I started the day today thinking you've got to be kidding me, and I'm going to rehash for you next exactly what. I'm going to go back to what I said earlier because I just took exception to it, and I don't mean from a personal standpoint. I think we live in a world today where people too often make things personal, and too often people take things personal, and too often people become acidic to become acidic. And the line that you will hear me say on this radio program 1,000 times is that if you go out of your way to be unique, you are in fact ordinary. Certain things happen, they need to happen for you, organically. And when you decide that you're going to be a flame-throwing, hot take artist that is always saying the controversial thing, it's like a house fire. You watch it at first and you can't believe it, and then eventually everybody in the neighborhood kind of goes, well, this is kind of the same thing, and you go back home again. And I would rather just be authentic and have people just say, yeah, I like about your radio show the fact that, like, you seem like that's who you are. You're not playing a character. So when I speak out about something, or I voice my opinion about something, or I'm contrarian about something, I want people to know that it's truly what I feel, not what I'm saying to generate buzz. I just think that's fake.
Or clicks.
I like when people say clicks, because I'm like, well, you don't click on a radio. I guess you can click away, right?
Well, if it's a good take, Jake, it may end up somewhere. You never know.
True, but then it would have to be in print for it to get clicks. I guess on a podcast, people can click it. But here's the point.
You know they can go to 1075thefan.com and do that, right?
That's correct. And they can listen to it again in podcast form. But I don't think of that as clicks. I think of clicks as print.
Well, you got to click to download, don't you?
Again, when people say something is for clicks, yes, I get what you're saying, but I don't think of that as radio as much as. But either way, we're splitting hairs.
They don't have to do that if they just subscribe to the podcast, Jake. They automatically download it on their phone, get notified as soon as it's published. There you go.
So no click is what I'm getting at.
There you
Maybe
go,
a
yeah.
Push. Okay. Here's the bottom line. Yesterday, the Colts named that Anthony Richardson was not going to be the starter and Daniel Jones was. And Anthony Richardson, like most people I think in this town, really pulling for him and really wanted it to work. But barring an injury to Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson coming in and having this incredible redemption story, it's over. It's over. It was over when Anthony Richardson tapped his helmet, went to the sidelines, and Shane Steichen benched him. As soon as that move was made, I remember sending a response on social media to Kevin Bowen's article saying that Richardson had been pulled as the starter, and I said, it's over. And several people jumped on me and said that I was way too premature with that, and that I was wrong, and that I was digging the grave long before that needed to take place. And you know what? Those people were right. I was wrong in saying at that moment that it was over, because the Colts very clearly wanted to give Anthony Richardson another opportunity, and understandably so. He is a gifted individual, physically speaking. He has all of the tools. He can throw the ball, physically speaking, I mean. He can throw the ball a mile. He can run. He can turn a 4-yard broken play into an 8-yard gain. He can dive for first downs. He had moments last year in drives where he was spectacular. But at the same time, he was wildly inconsistent. And while he made some great throws, sometimes they weren't even the correct throw to make because a better play might have been available elsewhere. And so for a number of reasons, the Colts decided to move on from the prospect this year of Anthony Richardson as a starter. And Shane Steichen made that decision. And it would have been easier. The easy thing for the Colts would be to go ahead and start Richardson, knowing that if it doesn't work out, you got Daniel Jones right there ready to go. But by doing it this way and going with Daniel Jones, you ran the risk that Anthony Richardson then would not want to be ready to go because of everything that's gone in and the label of bust and everything else. Because the difference between Richardson and Daniel Jones is the Colts drafted Richardson. There is more emotional investment. There's more future of the franchise investment in when and where he entered the NFL as it relates to the Indianapolis Colts versus Daniel Jones. So they took the bigger risk by going with Jones off the get-go because you, in part, if he doesn't work out, maybe getting a buy one, get one in terms of quarterbacks that aren't going to do anything this year. But Anthony Richardson, a year ago, when he did the helmet tap and was replaced as a starter, was told, there are things we need you to work on. We need you to improve in areas here. We need you to work on these things and come back. And they had an off-season 3-day camp where he could have done that, but his shoulder, I'm not saying that's his fault, but his shoulder was sore and he could not work out. So if you are the Colts and you're looking for improvement, you say, we'd like to see improvement, but we had to shelf that in our first attempt to see it because of injury. We liked when he was a rookie, and we wanted to see promise and potential, but we had to shelf that because he was injured. Then he comes back to start year number 3, and in the preseason, you have a game where at the end of the first half of preseason game number 1, you say, okay, let's see what we have here in terms of the growth of Anthony Richardson and the areas that we asked him to improve. And you'd like to see that, but you couldn't because he was out due to injury. And he was out due to injury because of the fact that he didn't recognize a defensive formation that people, not me, not Eddie, not any of the guys you hear on our morning show, not JMV, not Stephen Holder, not Zach Kiefer, not Joel A. Erickson, not Anthony Calhoun, not Hagan. None of us said he should have read what was coming. But Kurt Warner did, and those that played the position and played it at a high level said one of the first things you learn being a quarterback in the NFL is to understand trigonometry, and the formation that he didn't recognize that Baltimore presented was to understand division. And he didn't recognize that, and that lack of recognition led him then to lack of repetition. And the area where the Indianapolis Colts wanted Anthony Richardson to show improvement was in recognition. It's like I said about the guy that had his employee that was a waiter that knew the menu, that was great with customers, but the little things that take place in terms of the prep, in terms of getting the silverware in the right place before or after the evening, in helping make sure that the tablecloths are put back or laundered. The little things that people have to do in the restaurant inside the kitchen that the customer base doesn't see. That's the area where the Colts needed improvement from Anthony Richardson. And when Anthony Richardson was not named the starter and was asked about it, he admitted to the fact that there was an element, if you will, of surprise. This is Anthony Richardson on not being named the starting quarterback of the Colts.
Somewhat surprised, but at the end of the day, we all knew somebody was going to have to be on this end of the stick, and it was me. I feel like I did improve. That's what I talked about earlier. My improvement was there, but, it's still ways I can improve. It's still ways I can become a better player, become a starter in this league. So I feel like I did a decent job in improving, but there's still a lot more I can do. It's only about to be year 3. Saying all this talked about me being 23 years old. So I still got more time. I still got more time to grow and be a great guy in this league. So I'm looking forward and I'm thankful for every opportunity.
Okay. For the most part, not a terrible quote, except for this. I did feel like I improved. It wasn't long ago when he said, I just got to watch my P's and Q's. I got to be better aware. Again, the areas where the Colts wanted him to improve, and by his own admission, there was still room for improvement. This was all further complicated yesterday when his agent, Derek, and I hope I'm saying his first name correctly because it's Deiric, but I assume it's Derek Jackson. I'm not an expert in pro sports agencies, but in looking at Derek Jackson, who played football at Troy, looking at his company website, it doesn't look like he is a big-time, and I say that with all due respect. You know, he has a number of clients, but this is not Drew Rosenhaus. This is not Worldwide West or one of those you see that has like a huge client list. By all accounts, seems to be a predominantly Florida-based smaller player agent list or client list for the agent. But he had the following to say to Stephen Holder yesterday, quote, "We have a lot to discuss. Trust is a big factor, and that is at best questionable right now. Anthony came back and made the improvements in the areas he needed to improve, and by all accounts, he had a great camp." No, you're wrong. And it makes me mad. It makes me mad because you can't tell me that he improved in the areas where he was asked to improve when, number one, your own client is still saying, I've got to mind my P's and Q's. And number two, when you needed repetition from him, he was unavailable due to injury because of a lack of recognition. And that lack of recognition and not recognizing that blitz from Baltimore again sidelined him and cost you repetition. But it was never about even necessarily seeing where Anthony Richardson had improved himself as a quarterback. It was about showing Anthony Richardson showing an improvement in the understanding of what it takes to be a quarterback in the National Football League. And when you say that you've still got to mind your P's and Q's, and when you say that you were somewhat surprised that you lost the starting job because you'd improved in the areas that you were supposed to improve, that right there illuminates and screams a complete lack of recognition, both intangibly and in X's and O's. And for his agent to say that this now creates a problem because they've got to take a long, long look and talk about trust. We're in this situation because the Colts don't trust Anthony Richardson. And the reason the Colts don't trust Anthony Richardson, frankly, is because early they trusted him too much. When you were 18 years old and your parents said, you know what, we're going to let you go ahead and stay at home by yourself while we leave for the weekend because we trust you. And then you show you can't handle that because you have a party and the neighbors call and your parents have to come home early, then your parents say, you know what, we don't trust you anymore. And the Colts handed the keys to Anthony Richardson at a young age, not Anthony Richardson's fault, but they handed him the keys too early because they trusted him. And he drove the car right into the mailbox, leaving the driveway, because he was too young and too naive to handle it. And he was not consistent, and he didn't do the right reads, and he didn't do the right progressions. A lot of it not even his fault. They didn't give him the opportunity to grow into those things, but they don't trust him. And that's the issue. For the agent to say now all of a sudden, we don't trust the Colts? What? What do you mean you don't trust the Colts? The Colts are guilty of the only thing when it comes to trust is trusting that Anthony Richardson would be trustworthy. Now, as for Richardson, it doesn't mean that he's a bad person. It doesn't mean that he's a bad character by any stretch. There's no evidence of that. By all account, he's a good guy. And I mentioned this, and I've mentioned it 100 times, but I'll make it 101 because it is relevant to this situation. It's relevant to this situation. Anthony Richardson is a physically gifted freak. I mean that in a good way. He wowed everyone at the combine because he could do things differently than anybody had seen before. And that's why he got a scholarship to the University of Florida. And I watched the documentary. I watched the documentary that was done on Anthony Richardson that chronicled him as a senior in high school. And it did so in the same documentary with a kid from Texas and Bryce Young, who was in Southern California. And those other two guys, they were at high schools that were football factories. They had guys working with them on footwork every day and watching side profiles on an iPad of throwing motion and launch angle and elbow placement and vision and check down reads. And Anthony Richardson was at a high school where they couldn't practice on days of rain because they had nowhere to go inside. And they had basically just enough guys to fill out the roster. And they had a group of coaches that seemed to be really, really solid, well-intended, good men that just saw kids that were in a little slightly disadvantaged background and wanted to make sure that they were doing what was necessary to get those kids on the right path to making sure that they had a life beyond high school. And I give all credit in the world to that school, that organization, that group. But building and facilitating for kids that may not be at complete advantage is different than just automatically saying we're building guys that are going to be Division I football players. And Florida, the University of Florida, saw probably some of the disadvantage that he had from a resource standpoint for football and said, we still want to take him, and we're still going to make him a starter because he's 6'4", he can run like the wind, and he's built like Adonis. And Florida did him no help either. And then he gets to Indianapolis, and that's the problem, is the Colts put too much trust in him. Maybe it's because the Colts didn't trust themselves that they knew how to develop quarterbacks, because the two franchise quarterbacks that Jim Irsay had seen in this franchise since the mid-'90s are two guys that had grown up with fathers in the NFL and knew no different than seeing by example everything that's required to being a quarterback in the National Football League. Maybe the Colts did him a disservice, but either way, they involuntarily, just through repetition of the way that they'd gone about it before, they trusted Anthony Richardson too much, and then they lost the trust. They lost the trust in him, and they lost the trust when he tapped the helmet and went out of the game, and when they said to him, these are the things you need to work on, and he thought they meant make sure that you are still fast and you're still able to hit an 8-yard slant. And for his agent to come out and make this look like this is a situation where he had some sort of a disrespect, the disrespect would be in the fact that they respected him too much too early. Period. And I don't think Richardson's at fault at all, except for that he has shown a lack of judgment. And the lack of judgment in this case, to me, looks like he is trusting the wrong people. He's listening to the wrong people. Not that this agent is making him a bad guy in the locker room, but I think his agent is misguiding him on the areas where he needs to show improvement, because the agent thinks that the areas that Anthony Richardson needs to show improvement is in knowing the menu and being great with the customers. And it's not that. It's helping out the bus guys and the kitchen staff when nobody's looking. That's the area where Anthony Richardson fell short, and that's the area where organizationally, when you hear things like that, in the locker room, in the meeting room, in the boardroom, those are the areas that they feel Daniel Jones is better than Anthony Richardson. And the Colts know that, and you know how we know that? Is the fact that they basically have said, you've got to trust us on what is best for our organization. Trust is the key word here. And they erred in the way they handled it early, but since then, clearly, they learned that they can't trust him. And they basically have now said to us, just trust us on this. And because they're an organization that's been around a while, have they earned the trust in every area? Maybe not. But in this case, they have. And for the agent to come out and insinuate in some way, shape, or form that, like, well, we just might have to have a discussion about whether or not Richardson, this is the place for him. I'm paraphrasing the insinuation here. Okay, great. So the Colts now are going to have to trade Anthony. What are they going to get for him? When you go to a used car lot and you see a 3-year-old Porsche with 21,000 miles on it and it's $18,000, don't you immediately say to yourself, there's got to be something going on under the hood of that thing, right?
Needs a new head gasket.
Needs a new head gasket. Thank you, Eddie. 2 of them in 4 months. That seems off, does it not? Some clamps weren't apparently attached. But either way, it makes me angry. It makes me angry when I see, and I'm not some Colts honk, don't get me wrong. I think Chris Ballard has erred in multiple areas. I think Shane Steichen has areas to improve. But for the agent to come out and in any way, shape, or form insinuate that Anthony Richardson has not been given a fair shake in Indianapolis, it's year number 3. It's year number 3. And it's not always fair to pin on an athlete injury because that's something you can't always control. But it is fair to pin on an athlete inconsistency, especially if the inconsistency is linked to injury that could have been avoided with better awareness. And in this situation, Anthony Richardson and everything about it and the people around him absolutely screams, yells, illuminates, makes fluorescent lack of situational awareness. And if he had situational awareness, he'd be able to show us another 65-yard pass off the back of his foot. If he had situational awareness, he'd get opportunity to turn a 2-yard gain into an 8-yard gain with a broken play where he tucks the ball and runs. If he had situational awareness, he'd get a chance, if he gets blown up and his finger gets popped back into place, to go back out and do it again. But he has shown no situational awareness whatsoever. And when he is told to be situationally aware of what happens outside of the huddle so that we know and we can trust that he knows what to do inside the huddle, he has to show outside the huddle better judgment of the people around him to speak for him, to say the right things. And in this case, like Chris Ballard when it came to the draft of a quarterback in 2023, swing and a miss. Swing and a miss. But they have now their quarterback. We know that. We know that it is Daniel Jones, for now at least, barring injury. Shane Steichen has made it very clear that Daniel Jones is the guy that is not going to have a short leash, and he is going to be able to play and probably even work through some of the mistakes that inevitably could come his way. But what exactly are the Colts getting in terms of exactly what I'm talking about, the situational awareness? What are the little things that we don't see that might have allowed Daniel Jones to separate himself? We're going to talk to somebody who covered his time in New York with the Giants, and we're going to do it next. So Daniel Jones is he in a New York mood? We'll have to see, because in New York, obviously things went awry in the end of his time as a New York football giant. But he is getting a second lease courtesy of his one-year deal with the Indianapolis Colts. I think at the time there were several that thought that was going to be simply in like an understudy or maybe even supportive role for Anthony Richardson, other than Matt Hiblin, who we work with, who at the time said the day that he was released from the Giants, Hiblin said, oh, there's your 2025 Colts starter, almost flippantly, and here we are. So what kind of player are the Colts going to get this year in terms of the floor and the ceiling? Excellent questions, and those of which are, uncertain in terms of the answer. But Charlotte Carroll is with The Athletic and covers the New York Giants, has been on the program before and joins us on the always busy and available to be sponsored guest line. And Charlotte, I'll begin simply with that. Let's start with ceiling Daniel Jones, because it was, an erratic run at times with the New York Football Giants, and there were times where he did play well into the point where they thought he could be a franchise-level quarterback. When he was at his best, Daniel Jones was a good quarterback for what reasons?
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. No, that's a good question. Daniel Jones it's been how many months? And Daniel Jones, we're on to Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart. So it's fun to come on and talk DJ. But he just looked good in the pocket. He could get the ball out. And his legs, too, was a good element of his game. Mobile quarterback who was dual threat and could be effective in both ways, especially when he had Saquon Barkley next to him.
Well, that's the thing. When things went south for him in New York, I think the outside market, let's be real, Charlotte, and I mean this is no disrespect to your duty. And look, I talk Colts every day, so 6 and 1/2 dozen the other here. But the Giants are a franchise in the last handful of years that have not been necessarily the epicenter of football focus in terms of people outside market following them. So the transcendent observation would be that simply the talent around him went away as well, and therefore some of the toys were taken away and he couldn't show who he was. Is that a very nuanced way of saying it, or is there some accuracy to that?
No, I think there's a lot to it when you think about what went wrong with Daniel Jones. Obviously, at the crux, he just didn't perform enough to keep the job and was benched midway through last season. But not only did he lose Saquon Barkley, there was a ton of coaching instability over his time with the Giants, multiple coaching changes. He suffered injuries, too. We had the torn ACL, obviously, in 23, and then he also had a neck injury. So there's just, in my opinion, there's a variety of factors of kind of where this went wrong, and it just could never come together fully.
And then when things did start to go awry, let's begin with that, Charlotte. You saw in Daniel Jones, in the way that he handled the situation, the way his teammates did or did not have his back. What kind of player did you see when there was adversity?
I think he's a professional. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind about that. Like, he always handled his business. He wasn't someone who was kind of causing drama or like going in and talking about stuff to media. I feel like he dealt with it. He came in day after day. He talked at his press conferences, and his teammates did have his back. I think, if I'm remembering this correctly, Dexter Lawrence was one of the first ones to be asked about it, and he stood up for him. I need to check that on that. But they stood up for him, and he was respected in the locker room.
Daniel Jones, by the way, we're speaking with Charlotte Carroll, who's with The Athletic covering the New York Giants. The Jones tenure in New York, when you were watching it and he was playing well and he had, Saquon Barkley and et cetera around him, you saw his long-term ceiling as being what? Did you have the impression, Charlotte, that he could be a franchise quarterback you could win with? Or was he just kind of a guy holding onto the steering wheel?
I don't know. I think that was the question that the Giants kind of had to ask themselves. And, they agreed to that contract extension after the 22 season when they made the playoffs, surprisingly, in Brian Daboll's first year. But they did give themselves an out in that. And it was, obviously you're paying him all this money, but it's easy to get out of in that situation. So I think that's the view that they took is, we like what we've seen with him. Obviously, he had the success this year, but we want to see more, and if this can be continuous. And I think that is telling when you look back at the Daniel Jones era.
Charlotte, in terms of Daniel Jones now with the Colts, when you look at, and I don't know how much you are aware of the talent around him here, but it seems as though, pretty good receiving core. He's got Michael Pittman Jr., who last year had a back injury but had a good year. Josh Downs is a really good slot receiver that's kind of your in-space guy. Alec Pierce can get behind the defense, so too can A.D. Mitchell if he can find consistency in grabbing the ball. And you've got Tyler Warren, the rookie tight end, that seems to be a really good, solid target in multiple areas, and then Jonathan Taylor behind him. When I list for you that roster and those players, the kind of player that most would benefit from a Daniel Jones-style quarterbacking would be which kind of receiver?
That's a good question. Again, I haven't done much Daniel Jones and the receivers with in a long time, so that's a good question. I just think he needs someone who's going to be there for him consistently. That was always like his relationship with Darius Slayton. Like, I'd be curious, like, which one ends up being his guy. He turned to Slayton a lot. It was Isaiah Hodgins one year. He just got in that rhythm where he really trusted his guy. So I'll be curious who it ends up being in Indy and what they can kind of form. But I don't think it could be overstated enough that, like a fresh start for him will be extremely beneficial, just to see what he's able to do in an environment that's not New York. Obviously, he went to Minnesota for a little bit, and I know Indy's got its own kind of, there's a lot going on there with the kind of quarterback and stuff, but I think it will be very interesting if he's able to really capitalize on that. And then in addition, kind of who is his go-to guy.
It's interesting that you point that out, Charlotte, and I think it's a fair point about New York. Do quarterbacks live in a different fishbowl in New York? In other words, some of the deficiencies that Daniel Jones may have had might have been illuminated just by the media. And I realize I said we're not, the Giants don't get talked a lot outside of New York, but it's still New York City, and the amount of media covering the Giants is the amount of the AFC South combined, right, for every team. So would he have had the same, I guess, struggles of consistency once things began being questioned about him if he had played in Houston or Jacksonville or Tennessee? Did you get any glimpse of his moxie?
Yeah, I don't think, we're not the ones on the field. We obviously there's a lot of coverage and there's a lot of like speculation, and there's so much heightened media presence of just questions, and every little thing is going to be examined. At the end of the day, he's the one playing. And I don't think there was ever an issue of how he handled it, because he did. I wasn't there for his full tenure, but he was, like I said earlier, just a professional. He did his business and he just kind of handled it. He wasn't, again, going on rants or anything. He was very professional. So I don't know necessarily if that would have, like, his performance on the field would change in another location based on how much, like, the media attention got to him, because I don't know 100%, but all these guys are kind of like, they tune it out, whatever, and do their best to do that. And I do think he was one who tried to do that.
Charlotte, it just kind of felt like his confidence in himself was not there last year. And Tyrone Tracy, the running back for New York, who has ties to Central Indiana, being a high school graduate from Decatur Central, was on our morning show one time. And he said that maybe if a coaching staff and a front office and an organization can rally behind Daniel, have belief in him, and kind of instill that confidence back into him, it can prove to be the quarterback that the New York Giants was. Do you think the confidence from Shane Steichen in trusting him to start week one to get that confidence and some of that self-esteem back into Daniel Jones like we used to see in the early years of his career in New York?
Yeah, I think that's extremely possible. I do think the coming back from the injury too is also important to consider when talking about Daniel's confidence. He was coming back off of that, ended up in starting and all of that good stuff. But that's still, you're coming back from that injury and just like learning to trust yourself in that capacity again. So when you think about like the confidence, I do think that's important to consider. But yeah, it goes back to the fresh start and him being named the starter has got to be a huge boost of confidence as he's going into week one and knowing that's his job to lose.
Our listening audience knows, Charlotte, that Tyrone Tracy and I went to high school together. We're, I think, 2 years apart. Yeah. So
no way.
Yeah. I was not shocked by his emergence last year with the Giants of becoming their RB1. What have you seen from him so far in training camp and through the first 2 preseason games that you've seen that he's grown a little bit from his rookie to sophomore year?
Well, this is exciting. You probably know more than me. I don't know why I'm not talking about Tracy. No, I think Mike Kafka said, who's the offensive coordinator, assistant head coach, called him motivated. He's just trying to become a more dynamic player, and you can see that. And he's talked about his offseason and how he's tried to improve and get better. But he's kind of been the go-to guy. They turned to him in the first preseason game for multiple carries. I don't remember how many straight. But Russell Wilson went to him. Then in the second preseason game with the offensive starters playing more, he got a team-high 7 carries for 39 yards. So he's kind of that go-to guy. And then with the Giants drafting Cam Skattebo, there's a nice component. They complement each other really well. So Cam Skattebo has been dealing with an injury. So when we kind of see him back a little bit more, I'll be curious what the snap division is like and how they kind of play together. But Tracy still looks as strong as he did to kind of close out last year.
Charlotte, Eddie loves pointing out that he went, understandably so, that he went to high school with Tyrone Tracy because he's an NFL player, right? Aaron Gibson, who was another NFL player, went to Eddie's high school. The biggest person from my high school would be probably Babyface, went to my high school. Jared from Subway, but that's been kind of shelved. So for you, Charlotte, I'm curious, you went to high school where?
I went to high school in Chicago, so I am born and raised, and I went to Whitney Young. So we have some very cool alumni who went there.
Okay, who's the biggest alum of Whitney Young High School?
I think I win this one. It's Michelle Obama.
That's pretty big. That's pretty hard to argue that.
Yeah.
Now, what about Whitney Old? What about Whitney Old High School? Anybody? I mean, the older one. Anybody there? Okay, so Michelle Obama. Who's second?
Oh my goodness! I got in high school. We're talking about
Actually,
Daniel Jones last year.
At the very
8 months
least,
ago.
if Michelle Obama, I guess you could say former Oregon State basketball coach Craig Robinson also would have gone to that high school because they were brother sisters. So he would have. I'm assuming that he went there as well, right?
I think so. I mean, to be honest, Michelle is always that's prioritized in my head of that's the big alumni. We had a really good basketball program when I was in high school. So we had a couple. I believe we had a draft pick whose name is escaping me right now. But we had really good basketball. It was just a really good high school to go to, and lots of very smart and talented people.
Jaleel Okafor
to come out.
Jaleel Okafor's
that's the
there?
one.
Okay, that's a big one.
That was.
Now
He was there. I think.
It says here it's a magnet school. Did that make things difficult if you had to go through metal detectors?
Oh, jokes.
Yeah. Science. Look, you got a science bowl and a math team. Were you on either of those?
No, I was not good at math or science. Hence why I'm a journalist.
Academic decathlon, debate team. Yeah, here we go. This is wow.
Yeah.
This list of notable alumni is impressive, by the way. Impressive. Very impressive.
Yeah,
Ron Howard, but not the director. Okay. We need to add you on the Wikipedia. We're going to add you to the page here for notable alumni. Charlotte Carroll from The Athletic. New York Giants beat writer. Charlotte, we appreciate the time as always and appreciate the information on Daniel Jones.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm happy to talk anytime.
Wow, this is Russell, Maryland. I mean, this is an impressive list. An impressive list, right? I don't think she liked my magnet joke. Now, does it have – here's the thing, though. In the list, I don't see Michelle Obama listed.
I do.
Oh, Michelle Robinson Obama. Okay, there we go. Yes. That's very impressive for sure. The entire list is impressive. Stephanie White going to join us just about 45 minutes from now, but there is news to share with you regarding Caitlin Clark, and we're not even going to wait till Stephanie White joins us to give it to you because we will tell you next. 12 minutes before the hour of 2 o'clock in Indianapolis. For that matter, it's 12 minutes before the hour of 2 o'clock everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, the other voice you hear on this program. It's Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Eddie, of course, serves as the pre- and post-game host for the Indiana Fever radio broadcasts.
I do.
And that means that you have actually been able to enjoy the rare couple of nights off this week at an early hour, correct?
Yeah, like Olivia has now seen me back-to-back nights, and last night she's like, who the hell are you? I'm like, well, that's nice to see you too.
The latest from the Fever. Sophie Cunningham, we now know, out for the year.
Torn MCL.
They have answered questions regarding Caitlin Clark and her availability. We had mentioned, Eddie, that with the kind of break in the action, that perhaps this would be around the time that we would start to see the return of Caitlin Clark to the practice floor and ultimately getting set to go back into games. Stephanie White talked earlier today. She will join us coming up, by the way, about 40 minutes from now, and we will expand on this. But as of right now, still not practicing, correct?
Correct. She was not practicing. She was sitting with Ari McDonald, Sophie Cunningham on the side where the players sit to watch practice that are currently injured. And Stephanie White did also make mention after practice that until she's back on the floor and until the media sees her back on the floor, status quo right now with where she's at. So it makes me wonder, Jake, like, is the reason why they are so cautious with this one because this groin injury was much more severe than the previous, and they just haven't really discussed or revealed how significant it was? Because you go back and watch that play, and you kind of tell that Caitlin knew it was something terrible, like it was something bad, and it was going to linger and be something that was going to sideline her for a while, with just how emotional she was and how frustrated she was that it was another injury that she had suffered in that moment. And now it's been over a month.
Yeah, and you also wonder, when you think about it, you know, it makes you curious if they had all, and we talked about this yesterday, Eddie, this becomes a slippery slope.
It does.
If you have all hands on deck, you absolutely do everything you can to get Caitlin Clark on the floor because you are a legit contending team.
Mm-hmm.
Without Sophie Cunningham, without Sydney Colson, without Ari McDonald, I mean, the injuries have just been one after another after another.
3 season-ending injuries in 10 days is nuts.
But at the same time, you still have players that have been signed both in like the hardship role,
mm-hmm.
and then, you know, Kelsey Mitchell,
mm-hmm.
Natasha Howard, and Aaliyah Boston. You owe it to those players to show them that their work in maintaining and staying competitive and getting you where you need to be should be rewarded and cannot be dismissed. And if you were to say, you know what, because everybody else is out, we are going to shut down Caitlin Clark for the year, while that would be understandable, those players, they are owed the right or the compliment or the privilege of knowing that they too are getting opportunity, right?
The other thing too, Jake, is you mentioned those players. Just right now with where things are at in terms of contracts for next season, the only guarantees are Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston. I don't know what Lexi Hull's contract status is with her rookie deal, and I don't know what Michaela Timpson's contract status is with hers as well. So right now, the only 2 players under contract for the Indiana Fever going into next year after this year right now are Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark. So if you completely say, hey, all right, we're just going to shut her down, like, what message does that send to the rest of the league? Because a lot of these players around the W are going to be free agents this offseason because a lot of these players signed 1-year deals or did not sign extensions with their current franchise because there's a new collective bargaining agreement coming. So if you're quitting now just because you suffered a couple injuries, you have the ability to bring Caitlin Clark back and you have the ability to be competitive with her on the floor. What kind of message does that send to the rest of the WNBA and some of those free agents that you may want to target, in the offseason to bring in to build around Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston?
The one thing I will say in regards to the players they have signed for the players that the Fever have signed due to this attrition, and you can kind of go to that well in the WNBA more than you can even in the NBA or the NFL, because the limited number of teams in the WNBA, there, to be honest with you, are more WNBA level players than there are WNBA teams to fill those players. So the available free agent list in the WNBA is still probably a more, it's like when you talk about the Boston Celtics and people say, like, yeah, the Boston Celtics, they won all those titles, but there were only 8 teams, so how hard could it have been? True, except for the fact that every team back then was really good because you only had 8 of them, so there were only so many spots. You had the top 80 basketball players in the world in the league, as opposed to today's NBA where it's the top, 480 players in the world. And in the WNBA, women's basketball and the girls' game in general has elevated so much. I mean, there are very few players right now in the WNBA that didn't see the WNBA for the majority of their life. So they've had things to look up towards, and the women's game has gone so year-round at so many levels and been so competitive. But the league itself, obviously, you had teams that went away, so you don't have the same number of so you have plenty of good available players. Doesn't mean that you want to tap into that well and have to tap into it a lot, but it does mean that those players are there. But I do think it's interesting what do they do with Caitlin Clark, and does now this latest injury affect the timeline or the thought process of her return? And that probably is going to be the very first question I ask Stephanie White when she joins us in 35 minutes. Fun conversation earlier today with Tony Grimes, who is a cornerback for the Boilermakers of Purdue. He is fired up about the bucket game already. Comes to Purdue circuitously. He began his career at the University of North Carolina, where he played with, he said, his best friend, Josh Downs. Then Texas A&M, followed by UNLV, and now at Purdue. But that will be available in podcast form at 1075thefan.com. I am very appreciative, very grateful. Yesterday, I think that for me, I just, maybe sometimes I'm almost too open on this show. I don't know. But when I first got into radio, I remember this well. When I first got into radio, I was brought in to our sister station, WIBC, and I was brought in to be the sports guy. I worked with Jeff Pigeon, who was just tremendous, great guy. I loved every single minute of every single hour of every single show that I was on with Jeff Pigeon. He was so much fun and just a good guy.
Do you say that about me now?
And TBD.
Okay.
Terry Stacy was there as well. Obviously, Terry's still in the building, so she and I finally relived those days, even though I was not there for long, a lot. But I was the guy that came on. I wouldn't even expect anyone to remember this. But my job, I had worked at Channel 6, so my first radio job was at WIBC. And my job was to come on and say, I think it was at like 20 and 50 after the hour. I'd do 3-minute sports reports. And kind of hobnob and ham it up with Pidge and Terry. And eventually, when Pidge retired, they moved me into that seat. And they basically said to me, just be as edgy as you want. We're trying to get a younger audience on this station. Just be edgy, edgy, edgy. And I don't think that I ever was intentionally arrogant or intentionally polarizing or intentionally a jerk. But they really wanted me to be that way. And it was more, I was just very unfiltered. But I wasn't comfortable in the role from the very get-go. I was totally uncomfortable with that position. And I wanted to be in sports and not talking home mortgage rates. And eventually, they came to me and said, this is just not a good fit. And so I was let go. And then I ended up doing the show with Derek and then came here. But I think that somewhere along the way, and this happens for all of us, you assess where you've been and how you've gone about your craft, and you just make changes to it, and you make alteration. And one of the things that I think in my capacity of doing that I realized was being intentionally something other than who I am was not a good fit for me. I just needed to be on the air who I am. And one of the great compliments is when I'm out and people say, man, like talking to you, it's just like you're on the radio. I'm like, well, yeah, that's because, and Eddie, you're the same way. This is exactly who we are. We're not. And so the reason I say that, and the long-winded point I'm making, is I want people to know that when I talk about something that I find bothersome or that angers me or frustrates me, it legitimately is that. It's not because I got up and said, so today, what can I say on the air to be edgy? Because when you do that, it's not authentic. So when I was talking about my frustration, my disappointment, my incredulous nature of reading Anthony Richardson's agent saying that the Colts in somehow, way, shape, or form broke their trust, it upset me. And when I said on the air, like, look, this is ridiculous, I'm not saying that because I pulled the card out of the hat to say, what can I do to get people to listen to this show? I want people to listen to this show because they're like, you know what? I got the kids in the car. It's a pretty safe listen without a lot of profanity. And it's just a couple guys sitting around talking sports that's fun, that ties in some fun stuff. And it's just a dude talking sports. And so when you hear me say things like, what in the world is going on, that means that I'm legitimately saying what in the world is going on, and I'm not doing it to intentionally move some needle. But yesterday, the needle was moved for me, and it needled me when I saw that the agent for Anthony Richardson came out and said, well, and I'm paraphrasing, to Stephen Holder, we're going to have a lot to discuss here because there was a broken trust. What? The Colts trusted Anthony Richardson too much too early. If you want to talk about trust or defiance of trust or the break of trust, Anthony Richardson broke the trust that the Colts had in him. Not because he's a bad guy, not because he was driving 120 miles an hour down Meridian, not because he was getting the police called to his house, none of those things. Just because he was too young and too immature. And I don't mean immature like he's sitting around making body noises with his armpits. I mean immature like he just didn't grasp everything that goes into the responsibility of being handed one of the 32 most important jobs in professional sports. And there are quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls that have gone elsewhere and had to again earn it and prove it. There's a lot of trust that goes into that job. There are only 2 players, 4 total, in a football game that touch the ball on every single play that they're on the field. And only one of those has multiple options on what to do with it. And that's a lot to ask of somebody. And the very first thing that Anthony Richardson was asked was to master the craft of recognition and situational awareness. When you come up to the line of scrimmage and you look over the line, be aware. You know, there's a famous story about Ed Reed. 2 famous stories, actually, about Ed Reed. The first story is Law Dead. Eddie, do you know the Law Dead story?
I do not.
Ed Reed and Reggie Wayne were roommates at the University of Miami. Ed Reed was a year behind Reggie Wayne, at least in terms of their entry into the NFL draft. So Reggie Wayne had a pet snake, a boa constrictor named Law.
What?
A boa constrictor.
Really?
By the name of Law. So Reggie Wayne, with his pet boa constrictor, lived with Ed Reed, who was not a fan of the snake. But everybody in college knew that guy that has a snake, right? Some guy in the dorm has a snake, or you're like, oh my gosh, did you hear what, Flounder's snake got out? Well, that sounds personal. No, he's got a boa. Oh my gosh. And so Reggie Wayne had a pet snake, and then Reggie Wayne gets drafted by the Colts, and immediately from the draft goes and does like mini camp and works out for the Colts. So he says to Ed Reed, look, I'm not taking Law with me because it's a huge cage and he's a big snake now. So I'll come back and get him eventually, but since you're going to stay here in this apartment for another year, you just need every 3 days or whatever it is with a boa constrictor, you need to feed him. I usually give him live mice. You can buy him frozen, whatever you like, but you got to feed Law. And so Ed Reed's like, man, I don't like your snake. I know you don't like him, but just you're my guy. Okay, fine. So Reggie Wayne is in Indianapolis, and all of a sudden, one day, he gets a text. This is in the early years of the cell phone texting. But he gets a text from Ed Reed, and he opens his phone and looks at it, and the text just says, Law dead. And he calls Ed Reed and is like, what do you mean? Like, did somebody get in trouble and, like, there was a law that was passed and is there no speed limit in Florida now? What do you mean law's dead? And Ed Reed says, law's dead, the snake. And Reggie Wayne's like, the snake's dead? How did the snake die? Ed Reed says, I don't know. I just came home one day and it wasn't moving. And Reggie Wayne said, well, did it move when you tried to feed him? And Ed Reed said, wait, I was supposed to feed him? So, Law died. But Ed Reed, that's one of the 2 great stories involving Ed Reed. He also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there might have been like some sort of a pair of boots or shoes that Law became for Reggie Wayne to hold on to. But Ed Reed also had a situation where he was playing the Colts, and Ed Reed had watched film on Peyton Manning. And he noticed with Peyton Manning then whenever defensive backs would turn a certain angle, Peyton Manning would throw the opposite way. So Ed Reed one day on a formation on Monday Night Football between the Colts and the Ravens ran 3 consecutive plays where he turned his shoulders a certain way. And then when they had a 3rd and long and he knew that Peyton Manning was going to have to air out the football, Ed Reed turned his shoulders that way knowing that it was going to force Peyton Manning to throw in the opposite direction. So Ed Reed ran down, turned his shoulders a certain way, and then as soon as he saw Peyton Manning going through a check, he stopped and immediately at 180 miles an hour started running towards where he knew Peyton Manning was about to throw the ball because Manning was under the assumption that Reed's shoulders said elsewise. Because Ed Reed had recognition. Ed Reed had recognition of a situation and took advantage of it and intercepted Peyton Manning. And Peyton Manning threw that way because even though it was wrong in that moment, he had a recognition of what Ed Reed forecasted he was going to do. What he didn't know was that Ed Reed was playing double chess. But he turned his shoulders a certain way, and Peyton Manning threw the ball in that direction in anticipation of where Reed was supposed to be based on precedent. It was a situation of 2 of the most cerebral players at their position in the history of the game squaring off against one another, and both of them having a recognition. And that's what you want from a quarterback. And you want the quarterback, speaking of Baltimore, where Ed Reed played, you want Anthony Richardson when he goes into preseason game number 1 in a game where the Colts desperately need to see who and where he is. And he lines up and he doesn't have recognition. And when the Colts need him desperately to get as many reps as possible so that they can adequately assess who and where he is, in doing that, he is unavailable for the rest of that game because he didn't have recognition. And not having that recognition of the most basic of formations that Baltimore lined up in that forecasted and told them they were going to bring the entire house plus the kitchen sink, he didn't recognize that. And he gets blown up, and he hurts his hand, and he misses the game, and he misses repetition. And if you are the Colts, you're looking at it saying, look, we've waited long enough. We trusted that Anthony Richardson would have situational awareness. We trusted that he'd have situational awareness that would allow us to adequately give him what he needs, which is more time to show what he can do. But we are again being denied that opportunity of repetition and assessment because he didn't have recognition and situational awareness. So for Anthony Richardson, after losing the starting job and knowing that it went to Daniel Jones, to say that he was somewhat surprised by it because he had done the things they asked. And then for his agent to say, we lost trust in the Colts a bit, and we're going to have discussion here because he did the things and improved upon the things. They said they wanted improvement, and he's done improvement, and he's had a solid camp. I don't deny on the field he's had a solid camp. But Richardson, in terms of situational awareness, wasn't even able to show the improvement of the elbow angle and the footwork and the timing and the reads and the progression because he denied himself ample opportunity to show all of that repetition because he lacked situational awareness and it knocked him out of a game. And the other thing that lacks situational awareness in general and just reading the room is then having a relatively inexperienced, at least from what I could tell, agent. I'm not saying the guy's a bad agent, but when you look at his list of clients, it looks like one that hasn't negotiated a lot of big-time upper-end deals. I'm sure that maybe that information's wrong. I don't know him personally. He might be a wonderful human being, and his story is inspiring. He played at Troy, and now he's an agent, and he represents players from Florida. That's cool. But coming out and saying that almost looks like you have a complete naivete to the reality of the situation. No one is hoping Anthony Richardson fails. No one wants him to fail. He has done nothing in any way, shape, or form to show that he's anything other than a very nice, respectful, polite young man with a little brother that he's helped his mom raise. There's a ton about that story to cheer for the guy and pull for the guy. And you want it to work. But I think the analogy given to me by my friend Joe in the restaurant business is perfect. And what he said to me was, Jake, we had a guy in our restaurant that as a waiter was fabulous. The customers loved him. He knew the menu, and he was as gregarious as could be. But in the kitchen, when we asked the wait staff to help with cleaning up or making sure the bus bins were in the right spot or showing up a little bit ahead of time for napkin prep, those sorts of things, he was nowhere to be found. And as a result, the rest of the kitchen found him to be unreliable and arrogant. And I'm not saying Richardson's arrogant, but what I'm saying is when that man in that restaurant ultimately lost his job, the customers who were able to see what happens at the table were upset about it and said, this guy's a great waiter. But what they didn't see is what goes on outside of the eating floor and inside the kitchen. And in the case of Anthony Richardson, I think he lost his job because of what was happening inside the kitchen and his lack of situational awareness and his lack of growth in the areas of maturity. And, Eddie, I feel bad saying maturity, right? Because then it seems like it's some sort of a personal indictment on his intellect or other such things.
Yeah.
I don't mean that at all.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Just his professional maturity.
Just like the laissez-faire approach at times. Like there's times where he's just like too casual.
I think that's fair.
Like the comment after, just casually saying, I was tired, man. I just, I had to come out of the game. And then after the Baltimore, I just got to be on my P's and Q's. Like there's just a laissez-faire approach. It's like, dude, like when you made the decision, like it all stems from this too, a little bit, Jake. When you made the decision to go from college to the NFL with the limited amount of production you had, you needed to bust your tail to prove to these guys, like, hey, I'm here. I know I'm young, but you can count on me to be a pro. And pretty much there's been, ever since last year, there's been a lot more questions about him as a professional than there have been of him as a football player.
I think a big part of it, and it's...
And, like, to go back to what A.D. Mitchell said earlier, Jake, about Daniel Jones being more commanding and more, direct with, hey, I need you here in this spot. Like, to me, that's an indictment on Richardson, and, like, these are things that he's not doing.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. I just think I'm going to offer him this pass, okay? I'm going to offer him a pass in the fact that he, talking about Richardson, was always so much bigger, so much stronger and faster than his contemporaries in competition that he probably to this point had gotten away with just kind of rolling in and not having to do those things. He always worked in a restaurant where he didn't have to be in the kitchen. Florida didn't help him, theoretically. I think his high school helped him because he had, when I watched that documentary, like I said, he didn't have many resources, but he had a coaching staff that cared about the young men. But their job where he went to school, and I don't know the exact dynamics and socioeconomics of his high school, but from a resource standpoint, it looked very limited in the documentary that I watched. And he had coaches that were making sure that they were taking young men, young boys, and turning them into responsible adults, many of which maybe didn't have that guidance. And that's wonderful. They were great. I mean, kudos to those guys. That's great. And from a life standpoint, I think they probably did the right things in helping Anthony Richardson along. But Richardson then got this opportunity at the University of Florida, and you could see in this documentary that I watched when they're telling him, they're like, yeah, this is our guy that's going to Florida. He was like the big guy that got out because the rest of his team, they weren't great athletes. He wasn't throwing to like five-star receivers. He didn't have a lot of protection in front of him, but he was able to play at the high school level based on potential and based on athletic gift because he was such a freak-level athlete. That's no knock on him at all. But he kind of avoided the elementary steps of learning those things, and then he got to Florida, and they're like, this guy's a freak. So they start him even without him necessarily having the number of snaps and reps and starts that most guys get at the college level, and then he goes pro, and the Colts fall in love with it. And the Colts, I think, to an extent, trusted him too much because you had a precedent that they were familiar with, that they were banking on, that they were going off of, which was the fact that when they had previously, in the previous quarter century, only twice drafted quarterbacks that high that they were going to hand the keys to. Both of them happen to be guys who grew up eating at the dinner table every night with guys that were coming home from watching film. Peyton Manning used to lay in his bed and listen to old Miss games radio broadcasts and then ask his dad about defensive reads when he was like 8. Andrew Luck, his father, of course, was in the NFL and played with Archie Manning. And the same thing, and ran the World Football League. Have I ever given you my 6 degrees of separation of the Colts quarterback tree, Eddie?
You have.
Is it not the most unbelievable thing you've ever heard?
It is pretty fascinating.
It's remarkable. Every time I do it, literally, I could do it at the Indiana State Fair as a carnival booth. People marvel over that.
They don't need Ancestry.com. They need jQuery.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. And I'll do it at some point, maybe before the end of the show. But Andrew Luck came in. He was another guy that he'd grown up around it, just the nuances of the game, the recognition. And even those guys, even Peyton Manning, with that sort of a background, threw more interceptions as a rookie than any rookie in the history of the National Football League. But he had situational awareness that he went through based on repetition. And Andrew Luck as well came in, and they handed him the keys and said, "You're ready to go." And they trusted Anthony Richardson too much, and they erred by giving him those keys. The Colts lacked situational awareness when it came to Anthony Richardson, but they very quickly realized that and made the change and said, "We are now putting the situational awareness tag on you and show us and we're not blaming you, Anthony. It's not you, it's us. But we need you to understand this and grow in this area." And presumably he came back and said, "See, I did grow. Look how well I throw the ball." And like, that wasn't the thing we asked you to grow in, though. It's wonderful. It's like I always mention my neighbor Don Bell when I was a kid, and he was a Purdue fan and I was a huge Indiana fan. In the summer of '87, going into the NBA draft, I said to Don Bell, "Mr. Bell, did you see? Steve Alford's ready for the draft. He's shooting 500 free throws and 500 three-pointers a day." And Don Bell said to me, "Jake, he's a 55% three-point shooter and 92% free throw shooter. Those aren't the things he should be working on." And he's right, because Alford got to the league and he couldn't handle the ball and he couldn't play fast enough. And in Anthony Richardson's case, the things that he says he improved upon weren't the things he was asked to do so with. Really nice guy, but it feels like it's over in Indy, barring some sort of disastrous injury to Daniel Jones. Speaking of injury, Caitlin Clark is working through one. The Fever have had a multitude of them. How's it affect him? Stephanie White next. By the way, Jimmy, clearly a fan of the show. I think his name is Jimmy Johnson, not the football coach.
What about the NASCAR driver?
Not the NASCAR driver either. Absolutely lazy and terrible take on AR. Okay. I thought it was pretty in-depth, to be honest with you, Jimmy. But thank you for listening to the show. Hey, Jake, do you think that staff and management sought feedback from the prominent players like captains on the team? I do think that is a possibility, yes. Especially when, like, Quentin Nelson kind of inferred the fact that just like, look, just give me like a quarterback that is consistently back there. I mean, I don't think they dislike Anthony Richardson by any stretch. Don't misquote me there. But yes, I think that just the body language overall that you can probably tell, right, of the way players respond or react, again, to situations and situational awareness. Attempting to reach Stephanie White, by the way, head coach of the Fever. But we also have our text line at 239-1070 that we had mentioned before, and I'll be honest, I people text me to my phone as well, so I forget at times that this is here, and so I apologize if I have not read some of these. For example, Jake is spot on with his intro. Thank you. I appreciate that. Jake, excellent work. Well, thank you. Maybe I should read these more often, it would appear, right? I appreciate
because your ego's just going to, and your humility, Jake. We can't have that ruining your reputation of just your humility is just better than anybody else.
You know, as I tell people all the time, if you look at the long list of things that make me great, it's my humility that's towards the top, right? Jake, Jones could be this year's Sam Darnold. I think that's what obviously they're hoping for. And look, I totally get the fact that the Colts look like they're following the trend of trying to get second chance life out of a quarterback and that only goes so far. I get it. And Richardson is, and I get it, fans want to see what Richardson can do because it is so tempting of what the possibilities are. I totally understand it. Totally understand it. Jake, I thought your AR take, this from Matt, was spot on. Arch or Cade will look great in any blue. Arch Manning, here's the thing. I keep going back to this. And I know that people want to go with the Arch Manning, March for Arch. I'm not certain that Arch Manning would come here. And before you think I'm crazy, keep in mind that Eli Manning was drafted by the San Diego Chargers, and the Manning family orchestrated and said, no, he's not going to play there. And I know that Peyton Manning loves the Colts and what they meant to him, but Peyton Manning, I'm telling you, Peyton Manning is the most image-conscious athlete I've ever been around. I mean that not in a bad way. When Peyton Manning was with the Colts, I have told this story before, but it fascinates me. His number was retired at Tennessee. I was the number probably 3 guy at Channel 6 in the sports department. And at that time, Channel 6 was probably the number 3, maybe even number 4 station. So from a local media standpoint, I was pretty far down the totem pole. But Channel 6, and I'm glad they did because it was great. But Channel 6 came to me and said, we are sending you this weekend to Knoxville, Tennessee. It was a Colts bye week, along with Otis Jones, the photographer, Juice as we called him. And you guys are going to go down and cover Peyton Manning's jersey retirement at the University of Tennessee. They were playing South Carolina. So Juice and I drive down to Knoxville. It was a night game. And we spent, and this is a little glimpse behind the curtain for folks, when you do a news story in television news, you conduct interviews for hours before you actually get enough stuff to use in a good story. So I'm interviewing all these people in Knoxville about Peyton Manning and what he means to Tennessee and what he means to the Tennessee culture and on and on and on. And I'm interviewing this old woman, and she says, well, he is just so kind. He has a pool in Chattanooga, and he allows my grandson to clean it and pays him $100 every time. And I said to her, oh, so not only is he a great quarterback, he keeps a clean pool. And she laughed. Well, a week later after that, the Colts' their next game, I believe, was against the Patriots. And one of the PR reps for the Colts comes up to me and says, Peyton said he saw you in Knoxville. I'm like, well, yeah, I was there with Otis. We were on the sidelines filming it. And they said, well, he wants to know if he can get a copy of the tapes that you have of his jersey being retired. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm thinking to myself, Peyton Manning has been on the cover of Sports Illustrated like 10 times probably. He was on the cover of Esquire when he was at Tennessee. And oftentimes when I worked in local TV, I would have parents call and say, my son was featured on your Friday Night Football. Is there any way to get a tape of that? And yet Peyton Manning wanted a tape of his jersey retirement at Tennessee, which is cool. It's very down to earth and very cool of him. But I go, okay. So I go back to the station, and I didn't have time necessarily to go through and find the tape. So I literally just dubbed off the raw tapes of all of these interviews I did because I thought, and I sent it to him. I gave them to the Colts PR person. 2 weeks later, Peyton Manning walks up to me and says, I got to tell you, that joke you made about me keeping a clean pool, I had to laugh at that. I mean, that's pretty good. That lady laughed too. And it was a fun moment. And it took me a long time to get to my point here, but my point simply is this. I couldn't believe that Peyton Manning sat and watched every minute of every interview, presumably, that I had done about his jersey retirement in Tennessee. And I offer that story, and I offer that glimpse, and I offer that insight only because I think it shows that Peyton Manning is the most image-conscious athlete I'd ever been around. He had a notebook where he kept the names and the affiliation of every media person in Indianapolis. Indianapolis meant a tremendous amount to him. Being in Indianapolis and going to Cafe Patachu and going to Harry and Izzy's and going to St. Elmo and living in Williams Creek and being a part of having a children's hospital, all of those things meant a huge amount to Peyton Manning. This city meant everything to Peyton Manning. And Peyton Manning had always dreamed of, I think, spending his entire career in one city. And the fact that Peyton Manning was released by the Indianapolis Colts after presumably he had told Jim Irsay that he wanted to be and retire a Colt. And I do believe he also probably said, but I don't want to necessarily do that to groom Andrew Luck. And Irsay was saying, but Andrew Luck's ready to go right now. And I get and understand totally why the Colts did what they did. I totally understand it. From a football standpoint, in the moment, in the vacuum, it was the right decision. It was. And I know that Manning, people forget. We did not know whether or not Manning's neck was ever going to bounce back. We just did not know. We didn't know. And so the reality is that in the moment it was the right decision. But I think it hurt Manning so badly that I do think that he most likely still would hold that, and that it would potentially mean Arch Manning would do the Eli Manning San Diego Charger treatment. And I don't remember what the issue was when Eli Manning refused to play for the Chargers, but he said to them, if you draft me number one, I'm not going to play here. And they traded him to the Giants. So I get the Arch Manning thing. Of course, we don't even know how good Arch Manning's going to be at Texas this year. Theoretically, I think he's going to be very good. I think he's going to be very good, but we don't know that. Hey, Jake, this on the text line. I think you're an arrogant, condescending guy who just tries to be smarter than everyone. Do I have to try?
My favorite part's the last sentence.
Stick to IndyCar?
Uh-huh.
Do I talk a lot of IndyCar?
Not really.
I think you're an arrogant, condescending guy. Now watch, I'm going to call that guy tonight, and we'll have a great conversation.
Watch it turn out to be like a friend of yours just sending that to the text line to be funny. What if it was Derek?
Well, I can see the number.
You know his number by heart?
No, but it's an 812 number. I know that because he still has his Bloomington number. Jake, I don't disagree on the Peyton take either, but I'll take image conscious if you can throw for 4,000 yards. Yeah, I'm not saying that is a bad thing at all. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying Peyton Manning was keenly aware of everything as it related to Peyton Manning. And it's for that reason that I think it really hurt him that somebody turned away from him. And I think that's how he sees it. I thought it was interesting when the Colts released a video, and they released a video of players and their memory of Jim Irsay, and Peyton Manning's memory of Jim Irsay was how long it took Jim Irsay to answer a question when Peyton Manning would ask him a question. It was almost like and I get it. I mean, he did the video and whatever else, but it did not have the level of poignancy that others had in that exact moment. You know what I mean? And so I think it truly hurt him. How many people in Peyton Manning's life do you think have turned their back on Peyton Manning? And the Colts weren't wrong to do it. They weren't. And we don't know how good Arch Manning's going to be. They open up against, I believe, Ohio State coming up on a week from Saturday, right?
Week 0 this weekend, Jake.
And, nobody says that. It's just week 1. What does a week 0 mean? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
I agree with you that it is dumb, but they call it week 0.
It's week 1.
It
It makes no sense whatsoever. If it's week 0, it didn't happen.
got a game in Ireland.
Who's in Ireland?
Iowa State and Kansas State.
The Cyclones taking on the Wildcats out from the Kansas State. See,
You got two teams in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest.
No question. There once was a man from Nantucket who also didn't know where the hell Kansas State was. Nobody in Ireland's rooting for Iowa State and Kansas State. Can we not send these people? We've sent them Notre Dame before. Can we not send them Ohio State? Those people I got to tell you, they're totally obnoxious. I can't stand the Buckeyes. That's how you would know then that we're sending actual college football from the states over to Ireland the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been to Ireland, Eddie?
Jake, I've told you this many a times. I've never been outside of the United States
Don't
of
try
America.
driving in Ireland. If you want to know whether or not you can be and stay the test of time in a long-term relationship, then actually do it. Rent a car in Ireland and drive up near the cliffs in Ireland with your significant other in the car. And if you can survive that, I got news for you. You can make it through any of those indecent proposal Robert Redford movies in real life. If you can make it through that, you can make it to anywhere. We'll come back. JMV is on remote, is he not?
Carroll Stadium for Indy 11. I think they're previewing the Jägermeister
Speaking
Cup.
of Carroll, by the way, Charlotte Carroll, really good guest from The Athletic talking Daniel Jones. That will be available in podcast form as well. We will catch back up. I'm sure Stephanie White today, something popped up just in terms of the news with Caitlin Clark, and they talked earlier today. We'll see if we can't get her on tomorrow. Jake, great show. I agree with your take on AR. Thank you. Listen, you don't have to agree with me on the AR take, but don't say that it was lazy. I mean, don't say it was lazy. It took me 20 minutes to get there. That ain't lazy. My biceps are sore. Closing time indeed. Now this is I always get confused as to who sings this song versus who sings this one.
Semisonic.
That's right. That's right.
You go semi or semi?
Boy, that's a good question.
In that sense, but it's like a
semisonic.
semi.
I would say semisonic. No,
Okay.
semisonic. Boy, you don't really. I mean, I'd say semisonic. Now, I think I told you this, Eddie, and this one befuddled me as a kid forever.
Uh-huh.
A Schwinn is a what?
Bicycle. It's a type of bicycle.
A Harley Davidson is a what?
Type of motorcycle.
So when I was a kid, I'd say motorcycle.
Yeah.
And people are like, what? I'm like, a motorcycle.
What's a jacuzzi, Jake?
A jacuzzi?
Yeah.
A hot tub?
It's a brand of a hot tub, yeah.
That's probably right. But why is it a bicycle but a motor, or why is it a bicycle but a motorcycle? The suffix is the same, right?
There's one motor on the cycle.
Well, there's only
You got two pedals on a bicycle.
no. I think the bicycle. The cycle is the wheel.
Yes.
There are two wheels on a bicycle. Motorcycle. What I'm saying is, why is one sickle and one cycle? It makes no sense. At the very least, it should be a bicycle instead of a bicycle, right? It makes no sense. If cycle is the correct way to go, then it should be cycle for both because the suffix is the same. Now, I didn't realize that jacuzzi is the brand of a hot tub, but that's kind of like Kleenex and Q-tip, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you this, Query and Company is never going to become eponymous with radio show, right? I mean, can we just say that automatically? That much we know? These are the things that keep me awake at night.
There's too many things that keep you awake at night.
You know what keeps me awake? And I'm going to do this for you right now because I said I would do it before the end of the show.
Oh?
What percent of our listeners do you think have heard my 6 degrees of Colts quarterback separation?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm sure most of them that are regular listeners have heard it, but they may not remember it.
Okay, here we go. You ready? Once I get done with it, Eddie, I want you to grade it for me A to F on the level of, I haven't done it in a while. I'm a little rusty. Okay?
Okay.
Once upon a time, there was a team called the Baltimore Colts that struggled in football. They were basically mired in mediocrity. But they got a lease on life when they got the chance to draft a quarterback named John Elway, who had played at Stanford. And John Elway's father, Jack, had been a quarterback's coach and a coach at the college game as well. But John Elway decided he didn't want to play for the Baltimore Colts, so instead he went to the Denver Broncos. So as a result of that, the Baltimore Colts still struggle with mediocrity. They eventually moved to the city of Indianapolis. And once in Indianapolis, they found a little bit of luck with a couple of different quarterbacks, notably a guy by the name of Jim Harbaugh, whose father, Jack Harbaugh, had been a college football coach and a quarterback's coach at one time. But Jim Harbaugh eventually left Indianapolis and went to the city of Baltimore to play for the Ravens. Now, once that happened, the Colts were back to the point where they needed to get a quarterback, so they drafted a guy named Peyton Manning, whose father, Archie Manning, had been a quarterback in the National Football League. And Archie Manning, when he was a quarterback in the National Football League, had a quarterback that played underneath him by the name of Oliver Luck, whose son, Andrew, was getting ready to play football as well. But more on that in a minute. Eventually, Peyton Manning had a lot of success in Indianapolis, but then at the end of his career, he got hurt, and so as a result, the Colts decided to release him in favor of drafting a quarterback named Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck, who, of course, his father, Oliver Luck, had been playing in the NFL underneath Archie Manning at one time. At that time, Oliver Luck saw that Andrew Luck was getting drafted to Indianapolis, and he was very excited about it, along with the guy that he played for in college by the name of Jim Harbaugh at Stanford, which is where John Elway had played. And Jim Harbaugh, whose father, Jack, was also a football coach, was the coach at Stanford. Andrew Luck came to the Colts. As a result, Peyton Manning had to find himself a job. Went around, tried to find himself a job, and ended up playing in the Denver Broncos, and in doing so, signed a contract with John Elway.
Now, what do you call that again?
It's the 6 degrees of quarterbacking separation, right? Now, considering that's off the top of my head and I haven't done it in a while, do I get any sort of, what do you grade that?
That was an A. Nice job.
Was it?
Yeah, nice job.
Now, you know what else is an A?
Me.
You are for tomorrow's booking.
The Reds.
Do
right
we know,
now?
Do we know what time tomorrow?
2:00.
I
if
don't
we
know.
can pull them off the
Polo
field.
Grounds, yeah. Tomorrow in the Polo Grounds, I see that Ulysses suddenly he's taking a phone call instead of riding over on Chatham. Ulysses Bentley IV joins the show tomorrow, and you know what? He might make the roster. Now, do you think? I have a feeling that the voice might be offensive to him, honestly. But it just sounds like a rich guy. It sounds like a rich British name, Ulysses Bentley IV. I absolutely love the guy's name. But and I've seen some interviews with him. Seems like a fun guy, and he has played well in the preseason. And the Colts might have a roster opening for him, and I look forward to talking to him tomorrow. What else do we have lined up on the big show tomorrow?
Matt Taylor will join us tomorrow at 1:30, and then at 2:30, our guy from the Bloomington Herald-Times. Now, is it telephone, Jake?
It's just the Herald-Times. They got rid of the telephone.
Mike?
Nidelic.
Yeah, they got rid of the landline. It's just Times now.
And who
they
knows?
got with the Times and dropped the telephone.
Maybe Stephanie White tomorrow, Jake, if she gets back to you today and apologizes.
See what happens.
Just kidding.
She owes us no apology.
I know. She's very busy.
This from my
us.
buddy Frank. I canceled my appointment in order to listen to the Stephanie White interview. No interview. And when I rescheduled my appointment, they gave me September 16th. Thanks a lot. I apologize. John's up next. James, where's John today?
He's at Michael A. Carroll Stadium.
That's right. Little Indy 11 action, right?
I think it's Michael A. Carroll. It might be just Michael Carroll Stadium. I don't know. But yeah, Indy 11, Jägermeister Cup. It's Miami FC. I believe somebody won tickets for those
nice
earlier today on the Fan Morning Show.
All right, so we will throw it out to John now. He'll be with you until 6 o'clock. We are back at noon tomorrow. Thanks again, Charlotte Carroll, for joining us from The Athletic. Thanks again to Tony Grimes joining us from Purdue Football, both available podcast form. But wait until after John's show before you enjoy that. And we thank you for listening to Query & Company.